Imagine absolute darkness, the sound of crushing waves outside, and the slow, heavy heartbeat of a monster all around you. You are trapped in the belly of the beast, and the worst part is you put yourself here. Tonight we explore the story of Jonah and the psychological horror of running away from your own life.
Yeah, we are stepping into a very specific, a very heavy kind of space today. The mission for this deep dive is to explore a fascinating excerpt from a source text that deals with this exact human phenomenon. We're going to be taking a journey, a claustrophobic, intensely reflective journey that bridges an ancient biblical myth with the stark, sometimes really unforgiving realities of clinical psychology. This won't be a lighthearted chat.
Right. We are diving into the anatomy of panic, the chaos of avoidance, and, well, the terrifying isolation of the descent. And we are speaking directly to you listening right now.
Because as we pull apart the layers of this source material, it becomes undeniable that this isn't just an ancient story meant to be read in a dusty room. I mean, it's a mirror. It is a direct, almost uncomfortable reflection of how we all handle our deepest fears and our heaviest responsibilities.
Exactly. It is fundamentally about the mechanics of what happens when you decide to run.
The text we are examining today uses the narrative of Jonah not just as a moral fable, but to map out a deeply human psychological phenomenon. It gives us a framework for understanding avoidance. And that journey begins, as it so often does in our own lives, with the overwhelming urge to flee.
So let's lay out the first part of this myth as our source presents it. We have this man, Jonah. Out of nowhere, he is handed a difficult purpose. The text itself doesn't dwell on the specific logistics of the task he's given, though, does it?
No, not really. What actually matters is the sheer scale of it. It's a heavy, undeniable calling.
And his reaction is incredibly telling. He doesn't ask for help. He doesn't try to negotiate the terms of this calling. He doesn't even just try it and fail. His reaction is sheer, unadulterated terror.
Right. He is so entirely unwilling to face this purpose that he immediately runs away. I mean, he heads in the complete opposite direction, goes down to a seaport, and boards a ship just to escape.
He wants to put an ocean between himself and his own life.
It is the ultimate manifestation of flight. He is attempting to use physical geography to solve an internal existential crisis. He genuinely believes that if he can just, buy a ticket and physically relocate his body, the internal demand placed upon him will simply cease to exist.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that right there is such a profoundly modern instinct. We might not be sprinting toward ancient wooden sailing ships, but the impulse is identical.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the instinct to completely abandon our lives when the pressure crosses a certain threshold. But it makes me think about the mechanics of why we run. It's like a tectonic fault line. You have these two massive plates of your life, your current comfort zone and this new terrifying responsibility, and they are grinding against each other.
Yeah, the pressure is building up beneath the surface.
Exactly. Instead of finding a way to release that pressure, we just try to run away and build a house further down the fault line. But the pressure is still there. So the question we have to ask ourselves based on this text is, why is our very first instinct, when faced with our true purpose, so often absolute panic and flight?
What's fascinating here is how beautifully this ancient text captures a core tenet of human psychology, specifically the evolutionary mismatch in our nervous system. Our instinct to flee is rooted in fundamental self-preservation.
But in the modern world, it is almost entirely misplaced.
Precisely. When we are faced with our true purpose, or with an unresolved trauma or a massive life transition, the brain perceives a threat. But the amygdala, the fear center of your brain, it cannot differentiate between the abstract emotional weight of a difficult conversation and the literal physical threat of a predator in the wild.
Wow. So the brain reacts to a heavy career decision the exact same way it reacts to a tiger walking into the room.
Exactly. It floods your system with adrenaline and cortisol. It prepares your body to either fight for your life or run for it, but you can't physically punch a career crisis. You can't wrestle a failing relationship.
No, you definitely can't.
So, the body defaults to the only physical action available, which is flight. Jonah boarding that ship represents this deeply universal biological urge to put as much distance as possible between ourselves and the things that require us to change.
Because the nervous system demands movement to burn off the cortisol, so we move. We ghost a job. We walk away from a relationship the second a truly vulnerable conversation needs to happen.
Right. We abandon a lifelong calling because the reality of achieving it suddenly feels too heavy.
We convince ourselves that distance equals safety, If we change our location or change our job or change our phone number, the internal demand will just evaporate. We use the frantic movement of running away to drown out the stillness of the burden.
And this brings us to the tragedy of the strategy. Running away feels incredibly effective in the short term. The moment Jonah steps on that boat and feels it pull away from the dock, he probably experiences a massive drop in his anxiety.
Oh, I'm sure he does.
In clinical terms, this is negative reinforcement.
He removed the immediate trigger of his fear, and his brain rewarded him with a feeling of relief. But the underlying issue hasn't been resolved. It has only been postponed.
And as the text makes painfully clear, postponing it doesn't happen in a vacuum. You don't just quietly slip out the back door of your life without knocking things over.
No, there's always collateral damage.
Always. And in the story of Jonah, that collateral damage takes the very literal form of a storm.
The environment reacts to the unresolved tension. Right. Jonah is down in the hull of this ship, supposedly fast asleep, entirely consumed by his desperate need to avoid his reality. But his avoidance doesn't bring him any actual peace. Instead, the source details that his presence, his running away, triggers a massive, destructive storm on the ocean.
Yeah.
And this storm doesn't just isolate him, it threatens to violently tear the entire ship apart. It is endangering the lives of every single person who happens to be on board with him, sailors who have absolutely nothing to do with Jonah's calling.
This is where the text so seamlessly translates an ancient mythological tempest into the modern framework of clinical psychology. What we are witnessing here is the devastating reality of avoidance coping.
Yes.
And this is something you, listening to this, need to really internalize. Avoidance is not a victimless coping mechanism. When you run away from difficult conversations, when you refuse to make the hard choices, or when you bury your trauma instead of facing it, you don't just stunt your own growth.
You create violent chaos in your own life.
Exactly. And in doing so, you capsize the lives of the people around you.
Because someone else always has to pick up the slack when you drop your responsibilities.
That is the invisible pressure system of avoidance. Let's look at how this mechanism actually functions. When you refuse to set a boundary, or you refuse to communicate your needs because you are afraid of the conflict, that energy doesn't disappear.
Right.
It turns into passive aggression. It turns into missed deadlines, broken promises, and sudden, inexplicable anger. The people who love you, the people you work with, your family, they become the innocent sailors caught in a hurricane that you manifested through your refusal to deal with your own reality.
They are desperately trying to bail water out of a sinking ship while you are metaphorically asleep in the hull, pretending the storm doesn't exist.
Precisely.
So what does this all mean? When we look back at the wreckage of certain periods in our lives, are the storms in our lives usually just the delayed consequences of the things we refuse to face?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the answer is an undeniable yes. The chaos of avoidance coping eventually becomes entirely unsustainable. You cannot indefinitely outrun a storm that you are carrying inside of you.
It's just impossible.
Think about the energy required to constantly suppress a truth. It is exhausting. You are constantly on guard, constantly managing the symptoms of your avoidance rather than curing the disease.
The ship cannot stay afloat under those conditions. The weight of the unsaid words, the ignored duties, the deferred pain, it all accumulates to a breaking point.
The avoidance always inevitably fails. And when it fails, the text shows us the only possible outcome, the plunge overboard.
The moment the illusion shatters, in the narrative, the sailors realize Jonah is the cause of the storm. They realize that as long as he is on the boat, they're all going to die. So to save themselves, they throw him into the raging sea, which leads us to the most harrowing part of the text, and honestly, the most terrifying sensory experience to imagine. Jonah hits the water. The storm is thrashing around him. He is drowning in the chaos he created, and then he is swallowed alive by a giant sea creature.
He transitions instantly from the deafening chaos of the surface to the crushing confinement of the deep.
The source material highlights the sheer oppressive reality of this phase. We have to really visualize this to understand the psychological weight of the text. Jonah is sitting inside the belly of the beast for 3 days and 3 nights. It is absolute suffocating darkness.
Yeah.
There is no concept of time passing. There is no direction. There is no space to move his arms or legs. He is trapped in a claustrophobic, sensory-depriving nightmare, breathing in the stench of decay.
The noise of the storm, the screaming of the sailors, the wind, all of it is completely gone.
It is replaced only by the terrible, heavy reality of the heartbeat of the monster and the knowledge of exactly how he ended up there.
It is the absolute violent stripping away of the external world. In clinical psychology, this specific, terrifying isolation connects directly to what we call hitting rock bottom, or, in more philosophical terms, experiencing the dark night of the soul.
That reframes the entire concept of the beast. It's not a monster from a fairy tale, it's a deeply personal psychological state.
It is. For you, the listener, this belly of the beast doesn't look like a leviathan in the ocean. It manifests as severe, debilitating depression. It manifests as a total, system-wide burnout where your body physically refuses to let you get out of bed.
It looks like complete, devastating isolation after the storm of your avoidance has finally driven everyone in your life away.
Right. It is that dark, claustrophobic place in your own mind where all the coping mechanisms have failed. The ship is gone, the distractions have been stripped away, and you are left entirely alone with the crushing weight of your reality.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. When you look closely at the source text, the beast didn't hunt Jonah down. It wasn't stalking him across the land while he tried to live a good life.
No, it wasn't.
Jonah's own desperate choices, his flight, his avoidance, the storm he forced upon the sailors, led him right to the edge of the boat and right into the creature's mouth. The creature was just waiting at the bottom of the ocean of his own consequences. So, is hitting rock bottom an accident? Or is it the inevitable destination of running away?
This raises an important question, and it's the crux of the psychological translation we are exploring today. Hitting rock bottom is rarely an accident. Life forces us into this dark place when we simply run out of places to hide.
Because, as we discussed earlier, avoidance takes an immense amount of energy.
Exactly. It requires constant, frantic movement to stay ahead of the truth. You have to keep jumping from job to job, from relationship to relationship, from distraction to distraction.
But your physiological and psychological resources are finite.
They are. When you finally exhaust all your energy, when every distraction is spent and the consequences catch up with you, gravity takes over. The descent into the belly of the beast is the inevitable destination because it is the only place left. It is where you land when you can no longer run.
That totally changes how we have to view that darkness. It's terrifying, obviously. It's isolating. Nobody wants to be severely depressed or burnt out. But as the text begins to reveal, this descent is not without reason.
No, it serves a profound structural function in the human psyche.
We are moving now from the sheer terror of the descent to the haunting realization of why this darkness is necessary. The climax of this deep dive and the core message of the source text isn't the chaotic storm on the surface, and it isn't even the visceral horror of being swallowed.
It's what actually happens in the stillness of the belly.
Right.
The source text offers a very clear insight here. This dark, terrifying place exists to violently strip away all of our external noise. In the belly of the whale, there's nowhere to look but inward.
Because on the ship, Jonah still had excuses. He had the wind, he had the waves, he had the panic of the sailors, he had the physical act of running to keep his mind occupied.
Yeah, and in our modern lives, we have our phones, we have our perfectly curated, busy schedules.
We have our superficial arguments with our partners and our frantic attempts to just keep our bodies moving. We use all of that noise to drown out the quiet voice of our calling or the quiet ache of our trauma. But in the belly of the beast, well, there is nothing.
There is absolute sensory and psychological deprivation. The mind is finally starved of the distractions it has been gorging on. And this is a painful, agonizing withdrawal.
I can only imagine. When someone hits severe burnout, the inability to engage with their normal distractions feels like dying.
But what is actually happening is a forced confrontation.
And that leads to the ultimate, inescapable truth from our source text. You can run to the ends of the earth, you can board any ship you want, but you cannot escape yourself.
No, you can't.
In the belly of the beast, with every single distraction gone, with no more ships to board and no more storms to navigate, there is nothing left to do but finally, inevitably, face the demons you've been running from. You are locked in a room with the exact purpose, the exact trauma, or the exact calling you sacrificed everything to avoid.
And this is why we must understand that rock bottom, despite its agony, has a profound psychological utility. It is a place of severe depression and isolation, yes. But it is sometimes the only way a human being can find their way back to the light.
The darkness of the beast's belly is not the end of the story.
Exactly. It is the forced reset. It is life's way of pinning you down, removing your hands from your ears, and demanding that you confront the reality you created.
You sit in that dark night of the soul, enduring the quiet, until you finally surrender to the truth.
Only when Jonah accepts his reality from inside the whale does the creature finally spit him back out onto dry land. The belly of the beast isn't a punishment. It's a mirror. and you won't get out until you finally look at it.
Think about the one thing you are avoiding right now in your own life. Are you still standing on the shore? Are you currently boarding the ship? Or can you already feel the rocking of the waves beneath your feet? If the storm hasn't hit yet, well, you still have time to turn around before you meet the beast.